Welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Ancora, and I'm here to bring you captivating stories from some of the most fascinating people I've connected with on my own journey of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of the Wild Remedies podcast. Today, we are talking with Dr. Kevin Preston, and this is a really cool episode. It's kind of an intimate one because I'm actually starting to work with Dr. Kevin on some of my health challenges. I know you guys have been following my health journey and the things that I've been sharing on the podcast recently. And I did an episode, I don't know, it was about 3 or 4 podcasts back where I shared about how I was off of all prescription medication and I was feeling really good. Well, there has been a little bit of shift in my health, nothing too dramatic, but I'm dealing with some hormonal things that I have been struggling with since I was a teenager. And these are some of the things that Kevin and I are going to be deep diving into. And the way that I was introduced to Kevin is really unique and cool. So we're going to chat about that on the podcast as well. I feel like this is kind of like divine timing. And I'm just so excited to work with him. Kevin is really special because he works with people with kind of like mystery illnesses like myself. Hormonal issues aren't technically mystery illnesses, but diagnoses like PCOS or chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, these are kind of just cluster terms that basically diagnose a whole range of symptoms that Western clinical medicine doesn't actually really know what that is or what causes it. And so this is something that he specializes in and why I'm so excited to be working with him. So we're going to kind of deep dive into some of the stuff that I'm going through, but he also has a lot of really amazing tips for anybody listening and what he's been seeing in his own practice, some of the issues and stuff that he's seeing that are more prevalent in people, and why we are seeing such a degradation in health with, so many people now. So a little bit more about Dr. Preston. He is really focused on bringing in a new way of healing, which is based on 5,000 years of research. And he lives for creating health and vitality in others. And you can really see this with him. Like, he's just such a beautiful soul. Dr. Preston trained in traditional Chinese medicine, and he has a background in science and kinesiology. He continued to branch out by engaging in many different courses, seminars, and philosophies, which range from epigenetics, biological medicine, homeopathy, classical Chinese medicine, and other teachings from more esoteric lineages and spiritual paths. So obviously, he and I connect on many of those things as well. Kevin has been in practice for over a decade and owns a wellness clinic in Vernon, BC. His key focus has been on treating chronic conditions, unknown illnesses, mystery syndromes, and optimized performance. He is very passionate about helping people thrive beyond what they thought was possible. All right, so lots of really incredible tips here. I'm so excited for you guys to be able to, hear a conversation with a medical professional who just really deeply cares about helping people. And, I think all health practitioners, that is why people get into that industry, is because they want to help. Unfortunately, in, what we're seeing in our traditional medical systems today, just the way that the systems are set up, is it really doesn't allow for professionals to connect with patients. Oftentimes we're rushed out the door. You get to ask one question and then and that's it. Your 10 minutes is up and you don't feel heard. The appointment that I have with Kevin tomorrow, where we're working on testing, it's 3 hours long. And he does the testing on the spot, and we're going to find out what is really deep down inside my body that is the root cause of some of the issues that I'm dealing with. So we're talking about doing a part 2 where we'll reveal the things that he finds. And so, yeah, make sure that you stay tuned for that episode. That's going to be really cool. So without further ado, let's meet Dr. Kevin Preston. Okay, so I quickly just want to tell you guys about the epic holiday sale we have going on for the next few weeks. If you've been on the fence about trying our magic lattes, now is the time to jump on it because they are 20% off for a limited time. Just imagine yourself cozied up by the fire with a magical latte with benefits. We have 3 delicious flavors that help boost your immune system, nourish your skin from within, and reduce stress and help you sleep. And our latte blends also make the perfect gift for the wellness lover in your life. Our ritual box is our best seller. It has all 3 of the flavors and it has free shipping as always. And of course, it's included in our 20% off sale, so it's like the best deal ever. So do not miss your chance. Go to wildremedyshop.com or to the link in this episode show notes to get this offer today. Dr. Kevin Preston, welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast. I am so excited to have you here. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much.
And where are you right now? You have such a beautiful background. You're just like in a cabin in the woods, or what's happening?
I love cabins in the woods, and that's kind of my thing. And I manifest these opportunities. And so I'm up at Silver Star in Vernon area, and I'm in this sweet little A-frame sitting by the fireplace, and it's super cozy. And we got a lot of snow in the last 2 days, so it's like instant winter now, which
Oh my
I
God.
love winter. I know not everybody loves the snow, but I do. So I'm feeling pretty happy sitting in the woods here.
I'm a little bit jealous. I usually hate winter, but I'm not looking forward to it, but I don't know. I'm jiving with the season changes a little bit better than I used to. And there's just things that I'm looking forward to. I already feel my body, starting to crave warm things. So I'm making soups and like mulled spiced juices and things like that. And yeah, the dark I always struggle with a little bit, but I'm kind of looking
Yeah.
forward to moonlit snowy hikes and things like that this year.
Those are super beautiful too. We get to experience all the 4 seasons, so I'm really grateful we get to live here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, so I guess you're going to have a bit of a commute tomorrow morning too. For everybody listening, I have a really exciting appointment with Kevin tomorrow morning that I've been looking forward to for a couple of months. Bright and early at 8 a.m. I have about a 40-minute, we both have like about a 40-minute commute. So we get to hang out again
Yeah,
tomorrow morning. I'm so psyched.
I'm very much looking forward to it as well. So this is like the start of the appointment right now.
Is. I love this. Yeah. And everybody gets to come along for the ride.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody listening, I just want to let everybody know how I met Kevin. It's kind of a cool story. I heard about you a couple of times from a couple of different people, and everybody had like these remarkable things to say about you and how you heal people from these mystery illnesses. One person in particular is a friend of my cousin's, and I've known this girl pretty much, I don't know, for years. I'd say most of her life because she's quite a few years younger, and my cousin's been friends with her for since she was a little girl. And this, well, young woman now in particular, like she was just such a sickly individual her whole life. Like she was allergic to absolutely everything. Both her and her sister actually ended up in the hospital many times. She's almost died a few times because of, these anaphylaxis that she would go into over different food sensitivities and things like that. And I saw her a couple of years ago when my cousin got married, and she was just looked really great and she was thriving. And she just kept talking about Kevin this and Kevin that, and Kevin's so amazing. And I'm like, who's this Kevin guy? And she must have been seeing you quite a bit at that point. But she was just saying how amazing you are and how she's feeling so good and all of this healing and stuff that, she's been experiencing since working with you. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting. And in my mind, because I don't know, you're a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, in my mind, I was just not expecting, like a young guy. Just when I met you in person, that's not what I expected to see. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's like young and cool. And this is not what I was expecting. And we ended up meeting at a breathwork retreat that you were putting on with Pam, I think. And because
some friends of friends were mentioning this Kevin guy once again, and I was like, I wonder if it's the same Kevin that my cousin's
Could
friend
it
was
be?
talking about. And it ended up being you, and we connected and had a nice little chat, and now here we are, and I'm so excited not only to chat with you because we've had one introductory appointment, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. I was like, oh my god, have to get you on the podcast. I think your expertise is just remarkable. So excited to dive in with you about that. But yeah, that's the background story. I just wanted everybody to know, and also that I'm going to be doing some work with you starting tomorrow. We're doing some testing, which I am really excited about. And why don't we just get started so people can learn a little bit more about you? Let's chat about your background and how you ended up being. I mean, you grew up on a farm in Alberta, right? You told me.
I did.
And now doing the work that you're doing now.
Well, I think two things. Thanks for sharing the story. I love meeting interesting people along the journey, and it's always fascinating to see how things do come together and connect. And looks can be deceiving, right? I think on the inside, I'm a little old Chinese guy, which is probably what most people expect when
That's
they come to
literally what
see
I was
me.
expecting.
And I've had patients say that, so I'm not making it up. Like, oh, I thought you'd be this little old Chinese guy, and I'm like, yeah, that's not what's happening in reality. However, I just have always been fascinated even with my own journey around how did I come to be in this profession. And Chinese medicine has just been this beautiful adventure of life and learning so much. And certainly with working with thousands of people over the years, I've learned so much about health and wellness that I could, apply to myself and friends and family and loved ones. And the layers just keep going. And I got to know you a little bit, and I know you've been on a health journey as well. And there's just like endless layers, which can seem daunting in the beginning, but then it also becomes exciting. And that's kind of how I look at working with clients now is let's let's get into some of that territory in the body and get to a deeper level than maybe what they've gotten to before. And so I'm always excited showing up in the office, and I'm really grateful that I get to do something that I love and do these like deep dive investigational appointments, but we're really connecting with each other. And I say this a lot, actually, health is a team sport, and patients actually know their bodies way better than maybe even what they know because of the questions that I might ask. And, even things like just listening to a patient, and I'll say, like, so what do you think created this? Or what do you think sparked this? Or where did this begin? And they'll often say, you know what? I thought it was this thing like 12 years ago, and I was traveling and, I got sick or whatever it might be. And I've never really felt the same since, but I've talked to a lot of doctors and they all told me, oh no, it couldn't possibly be that. And guess what often happens when we do lots of in-depth testing and, we kind of work through these layers? That often is the case. And I'm like, you were right. It was that spark. It was these things. And certainly there's often, multi factors in every case, but I'm usually blown away by how much people actually know about their body, but they've kind of been convinced that they don't. And, I'm not trying to knock doctors or practitioners in any way, but I've just learned if I just actually sit back and listen, they'll tell me exactly what's going on. And they're usually pretty accurate. And, certainly there's like mysteries and things where it's hard to kind of put your finger on it, but people usually have a bit of an insight or inkling because they know their body. You're with yourself 24/7. You can't get away from that. And there's like experience that you can bring forward and share. And then I guess I've kind of trained myself and been trained over the years to really listen in between the words and listen to what is being said and how. And then we can track that down. And, certainly getting trained in Chinese medicine, becoming a doctor of Chinese medicine was a huge part of the beginning stages of that journey. And then learning more and more and more. And I'm a really curious person. It's probably hard on my teachers asking why like 50 times a class and just needing to know, that kind of tenacious learning. And I feel like you're like that a bit too. You ask really good questions. And I think there's something really beautiful the curiosity that we can have as humans. And when you get curious, especially in medicine, you'll start learning like so much more.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think a lot of people wish that they experience that more when working with a doctor, right? You mentioned when you sit down with patients that you really go in depth with them. And I think what a lot of people experience in kind of like the Western clinical medical system, especially like we have in Canada right now, is you're allotted 10 minutes in the doctor's office and you get one question. If you'd like to ask another one, you need to make another appointment. You're lectured to, you're told that it's all in your head, and then you're ushered out the door feeling really disempowered, right?
Yeah.
And it's really refreshing to be able to find somebody who's willing to go in and like do a deep dive with you. Because, what I think is really interesting is the types of things that you've explained to me, which I'd love for you to explain to the audience, is that what you're typically doing with a patient is you're you're diving in a way that most Western medicine doctors don't do. I actually haven't even seen this in a lot of naturopathic doctors that I've worked with. There's like been hormone panels and things that I've experienced with working with naturopaths, but you're talking about really doing some deep analyses and looking for latent viruses that you may have had as a baby, or parasites, that sort of stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to touch on a few of those things, I have a huge amount of compassion for practitioners, doctors, nurses, like kind of regardless of title, people that work in healthcare and medicine. It's not always very easy because you have people that are sick and not feeling well and often been not feeling well for a long time. So they're pretty unhappy, frustrated, in pain. Nobody likes being in pain, me included. And so I think there's like right off the bat, an element of it's kind of, I don't even know what the word is. It can be just very challenging at times. And I'm really grateful that I get to see so many amazing outcomes. And I know that's not really the case necessarily with a lot of doctors and practitioners. So I feel so blessed that I kind of expect to have good results with almost everybody. And I can be a bit hard on myself too. I'm still a human. If I don't get the results I'm looking for with somebody, that's also what led me to just become more curious that I must be missing something. There must be more to this picture. What could that be? And then it's led me to just become more and more open. And the interesting journey that I've been on in healthcare is, I've been practicing for about 14 years in the clinic and, retreats and events and many things. So I get to kind of look at the world through a few different lenses. I actually spend more time now on those first visits, like we're going to do tomorrow, because I want more time. And this is where I have a lot of compassion, especially in mainstream medicine right now. They don't have time. And it's really hard to get deep with somebody in 2 minutes or 5 minutes. And you don't really get a chance to connect. So I kind of feel like, how good a job would I do if I was with somebody for 3 minutes or 5 minutes? And, I feel like I'm intuitive and I understand patterns really well and I can see things really quickly sometimes. But that doesn't allow the nervous system of the patient to like come into a regulated space where we can actually just be neutral and connected. And then from that place, we get to be really curious. And then all kinds of things start emerging. And so there was kind of this point in my career where I was becoming more effective, more efficient. I understood more. I learned more. I didn't need as much time with patients. And then it almost came to this point where I was experiencing that, like, wait, I'm rushing now. I don't have the time that I want. My nervous system is feeling rushed and stressed. That's going to impact the patient in front of me, of course. and then maybe they're a little bit like thrown off because I'm a little bit late, and I really love being on time. And it happens, there's unpredictable nature. If somebody's grieving and just lost somebody and they're sort of having a breakdown in the office, which I think is really beautiful, and they have a lot of tears, I'm not going to be that guy that's like, all right, time's up, like get out of here. And they're in the middle of this huge release or shift, because that is often where the most healing happens. So I like to give myself time, and that's when I started learning, you know what, I want more time for me, let alone the patient, because I want to feel really good about what I'm doing, and I want to feel regulated and super clear that I can take the time and listen. So I started actually booking longer appointments. And I think some of the people I was working with, and even others I've met, they're like, what do you mean you're taking longer now? Like, you should be faster. And I'm like, see, that's the thing. What if we go the opposite direction? And so in these deeper dive visits that I do right off the bat with somebody, then I can hear about their journey. I can hear about their life. I can hear about how they're feeling. And that tells me sometimes more than the symptoms that they've been feeling or the medications that they're on. Is you get a full picture of somebody's system and you can really feel it. And then they get to know me a little bit too. And suddenly they're sharing things or talking about things that I doubt they've ever mentioned to anyone, because they share that. I've never told anyone this. Or, yeah, I've tried to talk to my doctor about this stuff, but I don't have time. They're rushed, and I only get the one complaint. And I could share a lot about that, and we can dive into that if you want. But I feel like if you had a car that had a few different things that you wanted to get fixed up, and you go to your mechanic, and they're like, yeah, there's 7 things wrong here, but we can only talk about your low tires, you're gonna have to come back again. You'd think, what do you mean? Like, just fix it all right now. So there's a lot of reasons why this has happened in conventional medicine. And this is also why it's inspiring for me to continue to see the healing that takes place in my office. And I often don't think that it's even me. I just think I'm listening to what they're sharing, and we have time for this, complex case or mystery syndrome to start unfolding. And it starts showing both the patient and me what the real like roots of illness are. And they have aha moments, and I have aha moments, and we get to explore those together. That's healing. And so sometimes there's cool, healing miracles that happen, and I haven't even really, air quotes, like done anything, but I've sat with somebody and in a really clear space because I feel grounded. And then things shift and happen. And so then we'll dive into testing, and the testing to me is just a vehicle to learn more about the patient and speak the language of the body. And that is one of the things I do, is test acupuncture points on the hands and the feet. And there's no needles, there's no blood work. Some people call it electrodermal screening. Meridian stress assessment is another word I've heard. Galvanic skin response is another one. And I remember Googling these things years ago and kind of laughing at the things is on Quack Watch. It's like all over the place. It's just like such a scam. And I'm like, well, if it's a scam, this seems to be one of the greatest tools I've ever found in medicine to learn more about my patients. And then they're getting well and healing from chronic, not treatable or not, typically curable conditions. And they seem like they're doing well. So I'm going to keep flowing with this because I'm learning so much about how to help people. And so that's part of the deep dive visit. I also use hair analysis inside the office, and we've got some cool gear for that that's like modern and digitized, and sends it to the computer servers in Germany, and we usually get it back while somebody's in the office, and we get information on vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and all these kind of nutritional pieces of the system. And then there's also pieces of like toxic categories like bacteria, viruses, parasites, mold toxins, things like that. And then there's an environmental category that could be things like heavy metals. Radiation is actually a big one that I see more of nowadays too. And chemical toxins. You don't have to stretch your mind very far to understand there's a lot of chemical toxicity in our environment, and it's hard to kind of escape. So I like looking at all of those things top to bottom to really see what is causing the most disturbance in the body. and what do we need to do to, start sorting that out?
Radiation.
Yeah.
That's wild. Do you have any ideas why you think you're seeing that more?
I have some theories. Some may be correct, some might not be. But if you think of humanity, even in the last, let's say, 100 years, maybe just over 100 years, what we're seeing in medicine, or at least what I believe we're seeing in medicine now, is a bioaccumulation of toxicity. And this is something that is very much not talked about in medicine much at all, is that we can pass forward toxins, and those can build up in our genetics, in our expression on this planet, and they can be passed forward in the fetus, and they can be passed forward in genetic material. And so you can imagine, if you think of our grandparents, for example, or great grandparents, the things that they were exposed to that they had no idea about with the Industrial Revolution. And
Mhm.
even if we talk about World War I, the invention of bombs, and that was very radioactive, not even nuclear bombs, but the things that they may have been using, like plutonium or uranium, and these things that the people making them probably had no idea what this would do to their bodies. And so that genetic material can be passed forward, and then you have another generation, another world war, and things like Chernobyl, and things like the tsunami in Japan. When was that? 10 years, 15 years ago. And suddenly there's all these toxins in the environment that don't really get that much attention, or they do for a short period of time, and then we just like, okay, that's cool, that's done. And what I see in the clinic when I'm testing people is like, oh no, that's far from done. And there's like kids that I've tested before where it looks like there's a pattern of radiation in their system, and they're 3 years old and they haven't been anywhere, they haven't traveled. And in those cases, I'm like, all right, the mom or the dad, let me see you. And I'll test their system, and I'll find, oh, here's these pieces. And I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of families where I've been able to even test the grandparents and aunts and uncles. And sometimes I've worked with like 15 or 20 people from one family lineage. And it is remarkable to see, oh, this stuff started in grandpa because he worked in a mine that was mining uranium. And you could see that signature and that disturbance all the way down through. And now I'm testing the grandkid who's, 2 years old, 3 years old. And possibly, I'm not allowed to diagnose anything. I'll just say that it appears that they have a pattern that could be similar to radiation toxicity from something like uranium. And so there's that part, there's this accumulation. And then there's all the other unknown or unseen forces of invisible pollution. Flying a lot gives you exposure to radiation and wavelength that may not be kind of healthy over the long term. I used to work with a lot of stunt people, and in some cases, I'm testing them and they're like full of radiation. And I'm like, what do you do for a living? And they're like, oh, I'm a stunt guy. And I'm like, oh, you had a few x-rays? And they're like, yeah, I've had an x-ray like every week or two for the last 15 years. And that builds up too. And so the amount of diagnostic equipment that is used these days, because there's so many more mystery syndromes, x-rays, CT scans with contrast, with radioactive dye, that
Yeah.
doesn't always leave the body the way that it might be spoken to the patients about. So I'm the guy that finds all this residue, and sometimes it's more than residue. And I did see somebody from Chernobyl in the past as a patient, and she didn't tell me at all. And it was kind of discovered. And I think this is where the myth that I'm, psychic or clairvoyant or something, and maybe there's some gifting that's developed in my system with this kind of work too, but I'm just tracking patterns.
Yeah.
I'm tracking patterns that somebody's body is communicating to me in various ways. And then when I ask very specific questions, they're like, yeah, I have been here, or I have been there, and yes, I did have this exposure. Oh yes, I did work in a lab as a scientist building radioactive isotopes for 20 years. And I'm like, okay, so there's a bit of buildup in the system. It's like, did you wear gloves or masks or things? And so what I've often found is, like, especially our parents' generation and my grandparents, nobody really had any idea that they needed protective gear.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked with guys that were like mechanics or painting like body guys for cars, and they had been painting cars for 30 years. Well, lead paint, chemicals, day in and day out. And I'll say, hey, did you wear a mask? And they're like, nah, we had the door open though. And you're just kind of cringing from a medical point of view. Is like, your body is so jammed up with chemical toxicity. It's going to be quite a road to get this right. But that's what I see. And so there's a lot of stuff coming to us these days that sometimes I admit it's a little bit hard for me to be optimistic because I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky person. And then I see the amount of toxicity patient after patient, and I'm thinking, okay, how do we work with this, more than an individual level? And, I've certainly got lots of irons in the fire and ideas that I have for how can we help humanity in a bigger way. And I know there's a lot of other people out there thinking about these things and looking at it beyond just myself, of course. So it's worth noting. And sometimes we don't always know where things show up in our system, but it's there. And then go about ridding the body of these things and, bringing the body back into harmony so that I can actually function biologically at a much higher level when it's not being dragged down by so many of these other pieces.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, there's so much to unpack there. And, what you're talking about is a little bit terrifying it's really terrifying in
It
a lot of
is.
senses. And it's something that I think about a lot, right? But I'm an individual who is acutely aware of all of the things that I'm putting in my body and on my body. Also, because I'm in the wellness industry, I'm constantly learning about health. Like that's my karma and my dharma in this life, right? It's to
Mm-hmm.
experience a lot of hardship in health, starting from a very young age, but then being able to teach from that because of the experiences that I've had to go through in order to heal myself, which is exactly what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the toxic load, and this is fascinating, terrifying, and it's like humanity right now is being assaulted on so many different fronts, right? Like we have trauma just from epigenetics, right? We have toxin load from epigenetics. We have endocrine disrupting chemicals from our dryer sheets to just sitting in traffic,
Mm-hmm.
with vehicles running. Every time I'm riding my bike, like there's this one little piece that I have to do that's along the road before I go off into the forest. And I'm acutely aware of the exhaust that I'm breathing. And I'm like, there's people that are just riding their bikes around town everywhere, just like breathing in all of this car exhaust. And I'm like, oh my God, like that has to be so horrible for your body,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
stuff in perfumes and like just the amount of toxins. And, not to mention the technology that we're using all the time,
Yeah.
Wi-Fi just in itself. And now we have 5G, which a lot of people like to be like, okay, tinfoil hat, conspiracy around the whole 5G thing. But no, there's like a lot of legitimate stuff out there that shows that it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really, really not good for you. We were joking about those, AirPods before we started the interview here, and like those things will fry your brain, like literally. It's like radiation
Mm-hmm.
poisoning, just putting them right into your brain almost. It's crazy.
Yeah. So if anybody out there listening is still listening and not super triggered of like the world's Armageddon and going down, and believe me, I went through a lot of those stages over the last decade or so, learning more and diving deeper. And you've probably had experiences around this, and many people listening, once you start diving deeper, sometimes it gets uglier, not better. And then you dive in further and you're like, well, if this is true, then these other things I don't want to be true, but they seem like they are. And then you go deeper and it kind of gets a bit messy. And so I struggled for a little while because I didn't want to talk to everybody about it, partly for this reason too, is like it can be pretty heavy and it can seem like a lot, and people's nervous systems would start, shutting down. As I was talking to them, I could see them just kind of curling into a ball energetically of I can't handle this conversation. And so for me, I thought, well, okay, I am grateful that I know some solutions, and I know that there's tools and there's things available that we can treat this stuff, and that it is reversible, and there's so much that we can do about it on a macro and a micro level. And I remember coming across Dr. David Hawkins' work years ago, and he wrote the book Power versus Force. I don't know if you're familiar, and he wrote a bunch
Not
of other books.
actually.
Well,
I'm
and part of the development of that book series was the map of consciousness. And the map of consciousness is about human frequency. And so they started doing muscle testing, kinesiology muscle testing, to calibrate where people were on this scale of consciousness. And as an example, for those listening, the low side would be the different emotions like fear, shame, guilt, anger. And as you would move up the scale, you'd come into courage and forgiveness and love and acceptance, and the frequency would be higher. And what they found, and this made my heart feel so good when I discovered this, was when they muscle tested people that were at a high enough frequency, they could muscle test them against any toxins, chemicals, things known to be really harmful, and it didn't influence them. It didn't affect them at all. They didn't test weak to it. But if you're at a lower frequency, oh yeah, it affected you a lot. And so I was like, oh, here's this key. It's not about what we're exposed to. It is about our frequency and our vibration. And this is why I think this spiritual community, the health and wellness industry, us talking about this stuff right now has grown exponentially. And
Mhm.
it makes sense that nature always finds a cure. The creator provides what we need, that through this invention of technology, chemicals, all these things that some people had thought were really good that turn out to be are incredibly toxic to humanity and Mother Earth all across the board. We are also increasing our frequency because we have to. And if we want to live in an empowered way, then we can choose to increase our frequency by doing our work, diving in, working on emotions, working on trauma, seeing people like me, seeing all the other amazing gifted practitioners out there, to collectively and individually continue to raise our frequency. And then I think it's kind of like the adaptation thing. There's always going to be some learning, and this happens in nature all the time, where bats are catching the bugs and catching the moths at nighttime, and then the moths develop better sonar than the bats, and then they're evading the bats for a while, and then the bats evolve a little bit more and they're catching the moths again, and it's just like this escalation all the way through, but it's constant evolution. And so I believe we're coming into a time just now and in the future. I remember hearing Dr. Joe Dispenza speak on interviews that he never thought he would see the type of awakening that's happening now in his lifetime. He didn't think we'd get there, but it is happening. Even if it's in little pockets, we're out there. There's people that are open and curious and asking questions that are really good. And through that process, we're raising our frequency, and the toxins that we're exposed to, they don't affect us so much. And so we can like kind of come into this evolutionary path on our own, because if we don't have that, it is terrifying. And yeah, I spent a lot of time in the workshop, so to speak, thinking about this endlessly, and what are we going to do, and how can I help people, and how can I help myself and my kids and my family and my community, and of course these bigger pictures of the planet. And just to add, I know I'm riffing now, but with the whole COVID piece back in 2020, when the world was kind of shut down, what was really cool to see was how badass Mother Earth is. That within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the air across China was more clear than it had been in 30 years or whatever it was, 40 years. Dolphins were coming back into different places where they hadn't been in decades. And I was like, that's the power that Mother Earth has, and we have that inside too. That if you stop the toxic overload of the system, even for a few days, people quit smoking, it is amazing what the body will do. It just regenerates on its own. And if you give it the right tools and resources, it does it even way better. And how amazing is that? Mother Earth can do that. And, we only gave her 3-4 weeks at a time, and she was already cleaning up the planet like crazy and fast too, for like hundreds of years of toxic insult. And she's like, that's okay, give me a few weeks and I'll start cleaning this up. And so I like to have that as an inspirational element for me as a human, that my body is also capable of that I can clear toxins, or that toxins can come and go and they won't influence me if I have a high frequency. And then I can just keep carving my path in life without having to like fight things and resist things and be in the battle and the efforting 24/7, because that's swimming upstream pretty tough. So there's a real balance in here somewhere. That's of course always a work in progress for all of us, I think, but there's hope. I hope if anybody listening can feel that, like, there is hope. Don't despair. There's so much more that we haven't even explored of what we're capable of as
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's important to name it too, right? Even though like we really are going through a great awakening right now, right? On so many different levels. Systems are being exposed, right, for a lot of corruption and things, and people are just asking more questions. They're seeing that things are broken. The way that we have been doing things is not working. With the Industrial Revolution, we are destroying our home and we are killing ourselves. We're killing the planet and we are killing ourselves. And it's getting really hard to deny that fact any longer.
Hmm.
People feel like shit. Most people feel like shit. Everybody seems to have a mystery syndrome these days, right? Like
Yes.
I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and adrenal fatigue and depression when it wasn't depressed. Like so many different things that people are prescribed all of these pills and things for. And this is why I am absolutely so psyched for tomorrow, because I know that there is something else. And actually, maybe what I'm going to do for the audience is I'm just going to explain a little bit about what I'm currently experiencing right now and why I'm coming to see you, what I'm going to be, what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. And then maybe we can do like a part 2 at some point where it's like,
Yeah.
here's what we did, here's what we worked on.
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool.
I'm
Because
game. I'm game
yeah,
if you are. Yeah.
okay, yay, I love that. So for me, and the audience knows, I've been on a health journey my whole life, and this backstory. But ever since I was a baby, there have been health challenges. Started with the throat infections, all of these other things with depression, anxiety, massive inflammation. And just recently, I've had hormonal issues for a really long time too, right? And I think this is something that we're going to be looking at pretty closely tomorrow, because
Hmm.
it's cropping up for me like really aggressively right now. I did a podcast episode a few back where I was like, oh my God, everybody, I'm so excited. I'm finally off of all pharmaceuticals. So the last 2 that I was on, I was on spironolactone. I was also on birth control for many, many years. So when I started menstruating, I think I was 14 years old at the time, 14, 13, something around there. And it wasn't a few months until I started getting really aggressive symptoms. So cystic acne, in the jawline area, on my back, on my chest. And I remember standing in the mirror and just looking at my face, being terrified, right? Like you're a teenage kid in high school, like shit's hard enough socially. And
Yeah.
you see your face transforming with like these huge pimples, and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be awful. And I remember my mom and dad, they kind of come into the bathroom. They're like, ooh, yeah, you're getting acne and stuff on your back. Hey, they're like, yeah, that's not a good sign. You're going to get it really bad. And I was just like, oh my God, okay,
Thank
this is
you
a
for
nightmare.
that. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. They're like, yeah, oh yeah, we remember we had it really bad too. And I was like, cool, thanks for the rad fucking genes, mom and dad. Great. And at some point I get carted into the doctor's office and am offered a shiny little pill to make all of those problems go away. And of course, I'm going to take that pill. Also because I'm sexually active and didn't want to tell my parents about it. And I was like, oh, thank God, I don't have to, my first method of birth control was prayer. So this was,
Yeah.
felt great. I
Yeah.
didn't feel safe enough to ask for it at that time. So I was happy to have it for that. But it cleared up my skin, right? And it was probably doing other things in the background that were maybe unwanted symptoms, but from the very beginning there was dysregulation there.
Yeah.
And I tried to get off birth control a couple of times in my 20s and always ended up again with like the really bad acne and just horrible symptoms. So now here I am a few months ago going off of all of these medications again. And I've done so many different modalities of healing and just thought, okay, that's it. This is behind me. And now here I am, 38 years old, and just having my monthly cycle and getting a really huge pimple on my chin, getting some really, big cysts on my back. And I'm like, okay, it's still like it has not shifted. This, whatever this is, has not been addressed. And so, textbook clinical medicine would be, this is probably PCOS, right? Like I've been noticing some hair loss around, whatever this area is called here, the whatever, like where the male pattern baldness usually happens, right? I think that
Yeah.
happens for women
Temporal.
too
Yeah.
with excess androgens. Um, like inflammation, I'm noticing is coming up pretty aggressively, like bloating, a lot of weight gain, all of these things. Like your body could transform so drastically when your hormones are out of whack. And for many years, doing all of kind of like a lot of the natural healing that I've been doing, I've gone to naturopaths and things where we've looked at hormones and there's been different vitamins or, low dose hormones and stuff that have been prescribed in the past. And to me, like that still just seems like a patch. It doesn't seem like it's a drug. Like there's something in me that is like, no, it has to be something else. There has to
Mm-hmm.
be something deeper. And that's, what I'm hoping we kind of discover tomorrow. And, I'm assuming you've worked with a lot of women with hormonal issues before. What have you typically seen and like discovered that have helped them?
No, I've never seen that before. um, yeah. So of course it is very, very common.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese medicine view of looking at this would be, okay, if the hormones are out of balance, that just means the body's out of balance. And if you rewound, 2000 years, they didn't even know what hormones were. They just knew somebody was having symptoms of imbalance in their body with their chi, with their organs or their meridians, because they understood that already. And then they would use herbal medicine, acupuncture, various like traditional methods, and they'd restore balance back to somebody's system. So when patients come in and, everything you've shared, thank you, that, okay, you're experiencing what seems to be maybe hormone dysregulation, or there's like something going on here. There's a variety of symptoms coming up. The hormones to me are an effect. They're not the cause. There's something creating hormone disruption. And so this is the piece that I like to get into a little bit deeper. Is it's sort of been almost accepted in mainstream medicine and even various aspects of natural medicine. It's like, oh, you have all these symptoms because your hormones are off. And then you take an intervention to correct the hormones, like hormone therapy or something else, and like, hey, you feel better. And people sometimes for a time feel better, but the core level issue underneath that is still not addressed. And so I believe you're right. Like it is just a patch. And then on the surface level, hey, my symptoms may or may not be better. Let's just assume they're better with that kind of intervention. The deeper pattern is being overlooked and will continue to compound and usually get more severe and may show up as like something else then. And then suddenly you're taking an intervention to treat that. And then, oh, my mood's pretty off now. Now I'm going to take an intervention to treat that. And it's this whole domino effect, but not in a good way. And so I suspect what we'll find with you is that there might be these elements of what I would call lingering pathogens in Chinese medicine. It's kind of a term. They call it like GU syndrome, GU. And
Okay.
it sounds a little bit funny, right? But yeah, it's like toxins, like lingering pathogens, lingering toxins in the body. And so some of the elements that were creating this disruption already at 13 or 14, those are the things that we'll probably find, because likely you may have addressed them in a few different ways. I'm not saying that you haven't had really great treatment along the way, but it also is still showing us there's more to this picture. And a lot of times I find people aren't getting like deep enough or precise enough with those elements that started right in the beginning. And most of the treatment that the majority of patients had is all suppressive medication. So as soon as a symptom comes up, it's like, no, let's just push that back down.
Yep.
And it's like whack-a-mole at the circus. Like it just doesn't end. And until you actually like get in underneath some of this material and start clearing it from the body, or finding like what is the disruption here, or how many pieces is there to this puzzle, it doesn't fully resolve. And so I really like to have a bird's eye view and look at the full spectrum of all of these pieces, because they all have a hand in it. But this stuff has been suppressed in your body, just like you mentioned, you've been on lots of medications. Each one of those medications typically is never designed to treat the root element. So where does the root imbalance go? Nowhere. It just kind of gets compressed deeper, 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 and it almost becomes like geology. Then it's like sediment rock deep in the system. And yeah, instead of creating diamonds under all that pressure, it's creating illness and disruption. And it always reaches the surface at some place or in some way. You know, that energy has to go somewhere. So we can try and pack it down in there all we want. It's going to show up in some way. And so
Mhm.
those are the things that I'm usually doing, which is kind of opposite. Let's pull the lid off that stuff and let's bring it to the surface. Let's help the body bring it to the surface, and then clear it, and then resolve those layers and integrate them and bring the body back into harmony with itself. And as the body comes into harmony with itself, it may bring more layers up to the surface, and then those get to be cleared. And so you get to do like a full excavation of current day, and then all the way back and further and further and further back, like right to childhood, right to toddler, baby. And in a lot of cases we'll go beyond that, because then we'll start finding the toxins that you likely got past. And it's not your mom or your dad's fault. You know, they got past genetics and these toxins that they never even knew about as well. But we can often follow these things further back, and then sometimes I'm able to guess people's lineage of where they came from or where they live, just because I've learned a lot about where some of these exposures come from. And, you know, not to mention the mental emotional pieces along the way that have a very direct bearing on like bacterial expression, viral expression, and they can all be locked in there in the body as like this time capsule. So if you were experiencing along at 13 or 14, for example, mentally, emotionally, I don't know many 13 or 14-year-olds that aren't experiencing a lot mentally, emotionally. It's just part of life here. But if you take on like a viral expression at that time, you know, Epstein-Barr is a great example. It gets used a lot in conventional medicine and alternative medicine too. People know about it. It's what causes mono, or that's the thought you know, framework there. Let's say you're going through an incredibly difficult time at 14 for whatever reason, you know, maybe bullied at school, or you know, your parents are going through a lot of stuff and you're internalizing some of their emotion. And let's say you get Epstein-Barr, you get mono at that time. There's been cases where I've seen this pattern show up, you know, 20, 30, 40 years later in somebody. And when we start clearing that and integrating that into the body, they may get a surge of anger and grief and all these feelings coming up. And they're like, Kevin, what'd you give me? Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, what the hell, man? And we get chatting and I'm like, do you remember when you had Epstein-Barr? And they'll be like, well, yeah, I was 14. And I was like, and what was going on at that time in your life? And they have this light bulb moment of like, oh my God, I was so angry then, or I was experiencing so much grief. And it's so fascinating that through treating the viral expression to bring balance back, the emotional blueprinting is now coming out, and those imprints that were there, and the time capsule is now revealing itself, but then it can be cleared or integrated and put back into right order in the system. So it's not just like the toxin, it's like everything else associated with that, because the emotions can be the toxins at times. Not that emotions are bad, but if they're unexpressed or unmet in the system, then they can become problematic. And you could have an emotion that sparks a dormant virus into being that was laying low in the body, and you go through an emotional trauma or a breakup or divorce or something like that, and suddenly viral load is just rampant in your system, and you're like, what's going on with that? And it's like, it was triggered, it was sparked by challenge. And so we may see all of that. So tomorrow's going to be fun, Krista.
Oh my God. Okay, that's so interesting because I was just thinking after a traumatic event that I went through a few years ago, I had this resurgent of like these hormonal symptoms, even though I was on, the hormone blockers, like the birth control and stuff that I was on. So that's really interesting. And you mentioned Epstein-Barr. That I think that is what was cleared from my cousin's friend that I mentioned previously. So the girl that was like deathly ill with all the food allergens.
Mm.
That's what you guys ended up working on clearing. And now she doesn't have to go to the hospital because she ate, beans or whatever it is. Like, how wild is that? Right? So many
It
people
can
suffer
be
with
pretty
food
wild.
sensitivities. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, the
Oh my God.
body's usually just responding to a lot of inflammation and irritation in the system. And again, you got to follow the rabbit hole a little bit deeper. That's what I've been finding with patients, which is ultimately why I ended up wanting more time with them, so that we could get to that depth and discover what's at the bottom of the pile here. Because
Mm-hmm.
it often had never been overturned or even looked at, sometimes not even close. But sometimes even practitioners that other patients would have seen, they had done a really good job, and they were correct of like, hey, you've got this and this in your body, but maybe it just wasn't deep enough, or there was a few other pieces that weren't fully seen, and it stayed kind of stuck, or it didn't clear fully. And then sometimes I may discover, hey, you've still got some of these things going on in their body, and they're like, yeah, but I spent thousands of dollars and years like treating that, I should be good. And I'm like, I'm
Me?
sorry that it may not be. However, it doesn't mean that somebody didn't do a good job. We all have different expertise. We all have different gifting. I refer patients out all the time to work with the gifts of other practitioners that I feel are a good match, maybe in addition to what I'm doing. And there's times I might say, hey, you're not ready for me yet. I want you to go and do this and this and this, and then come back, because then you'll be ready and you'll get way more from what I'm going to do with you, or vice versa. Like I said in the beginning, health is a team sport. So I love it when people cultivate teams for themselves. And it sometimes, that cliche saying, like, it takes a village, but it does. And there's many things that maybe aren't my gifting, and there's many things that are. And wherever those kind of gaps are, I'm going to help find that other person, or send them to those other modalities along with what I'm doing, because then you see like the most miraculous healing happen. And that's what I'm there for. That's what inspires me to, show up each day and, see what can we discover today,
Yeah.
and whose health can be affected in that way. And then their health being much better is going to affect their family and loved ones and everybody in their community. So it does have this like wave propagation that's exciting too.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that truly is such a beautiful gift, and I'm so grateful that we get to explore this together.
Oh, you're doing really well, because I'm speaking of these things, and I can feel, it's like there's a lot processing in your system. And, of course, we're going to unpack it more. But I guess I wasn't joking when I said our session was, starting right now. So thanks
No
for being so
kidding.
open to just chat about these things, because, yeah, we're multidimensional beings, and it can be complex sometimes, but we can try and distill this stuff down to be more simple of what's in there that doesn't need to be in there anymore. It's not coming for the next stages of your journey. It's not serving the system anymore. And let's offload a bunch of those layers so your body can come back into balance, and yeah, and cool things happen.
Mhm. Oh man. I am looking forward to, I've always felt like my 40s are just going to be the most fabulous decade. I'm going to have the most vibrant health that I've ever experienced in my entire fucking life. And I am so here for it because I have just worked and worked and worked so hard at my health. And, we've had this conversation where it's like, I get 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Like it's just kind of, I'm stuck in this little space. And I know that I know there's something more that needs to be cleared. And I've done a lot of the emotional stuff, a lot of the spiritual things. And, but there's still more to work on. That is my journey. And,
Mhm.
I think this is going to be another piece of the puzzle and another step forward that hopefully, allows me to take several steps forward and no more steps back. No more steps back.
Well, and there's this interesting piece that, because I've heard what you've shared from literally like thousands of patients, where it can be frustrating, or you can kind of lose hope of, I'm just spinning my wheels here and I've done so many things, and I've seen patients that have spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last decade, and they're kind of better, but sometimes they're not. And you can imagine how frustrating and how challenging that would be to not get traction, to not get the breakthroughs, or maybe very little. But what I've found is that, you know we got to trust in the bigger picture somehow, that in some ways, even though it was a challenge or a struggle, that it reveals more of who you are, cultivates character, cultivates resourcefulness. Definitely something I've seen it cultivate is gratitude in the patients that I've seen that have been really sick. When they get well, and as they get well, they have some of the most profound gratitude for being well and being so grateful to be here on this planet. They don't take anything for granted. They really live life fully after that, because they know what it's like to not be healthy. And
Yep.
so there is some gifts that, I've seen this next level appreciation of life because of their journey and because of pain, and that they actually still may have got way more progress than what they think, because it can be hard to measure sometimes. Where would they be without the treatment they've done? Where would they be without all those appointments and things that maybe didn't seem to give them the answers or the results? But it can, again, it's hard to track. It may actually have had quite an impact. And sometimes I feel like I'm the guy at the end that comes in and, you know, takes it to the next level, but that a decade of practitioners before me and the person were working their asses off. And then I'm seeing this one piece or these two pieces that haven't ever been addressed. And as soon as you connect those dots, boom, the whole system just comes online. And, sometimes I am the guy that's been working with somebody for a number of years and others, and it's that slow and steady, and they get there, and it's a tremendously rewarding journey, even if it's challenging at times. So I would say that all that effort is not lost, even though sometimes it feels like it is, because I can usually tell when people have been doing treatment, because I can see it in their body, I can see it in their readings, and there's all this beautiful groundwork and infrastructure that maybe just hasn't quite like come together in that cohesive way, but it's close. And they're actually not as far as what they think, or not as far as what they feel, from feeling a huge increase in their vitality and the way that they're living and the way that they're experiencing. So it does count, and
Mhm.
what people eat and their diet. And sometimes they're like, Kevin, I couldn't have a better diet. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything. I do yoga, like I meditate, I do every single thing that is supposed to make you healthy, and I'm not. But I tell you what, like their treatment goes way faster.
Yeah.
They recover way faster. Like it
Mhm.
does count for sure. So
Totally.
anybody needing a bit of hope on that like keep going, and trust your body. That's the other thing that I've seen with patients. If you can connect in with yourself enough, you know who to see. Like you
Mhm.
can feel where you're supposed to go. You can feel who you need to talk to, and you don't always get 100 steps ahead. You may just get that next breadcrumb of, I got to talk to somebody. There was something that grabbed my attention with something they said, and I'm going to follow that up. So follow the energy and you'll find your people. And it could be me, it could be many other people, coaches and, counselors, or, there's all these teams of people out there waiting to help you. But you got to ask, and you got to follow your own energy. And then, yeah, it does come together. So good job sticking with your own journey for so long. And yeah, I can't wait to dive in with you even more. This is going to be super fun.
Yeah. Well, and and there has been so much progress, right? Like I was bedridden. Like I was barely functional for years and years and years. And what you mentioned about this feeling of gratitude, it's funny because every time there is a big shift in my health, like for example, when I discovered that gluten was basically making me suicidal and eliminated that from my diet, I was just like, wow, like, it was quick. It happened within, 1 to 3 months that it was just like
Wow.
I went from having a very, very difficult time functioning and getting out of bed and just extremely low mood all the time to just being like, oh, like I'm having consecutive days of feeling good and having energy and and then focusing on gut health, and all of these things that I've done along the way have just created so much resilience. And so even though I know there are pieces that are still off, and again, like I'm very sensitive to this too, right? Because it's something that I'm always quite hyper focused on. um, there are things that you can be doing right now that can put you in a better state than where you currently are. And yes, doing all the investigational stuff, especially if you are suffering with mystery syndromes, right? Like
Hmm.
there's always more to investigate there. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to dive in a little bit more on some tips that maybe you could give folks, because we talked about, a lot of people suffering with toxin overloads and things like that. Like, do you have any quick tips or things that people can be doing right now in order to eliminate some of those toxins? Or are there any sort of like cleanses and things that people can just even like pick up from the health food store just to kind of get started? And then after that, what is the next step? Like, obviously, people might want to get connected with you, or are, if say they don't live anywhere in our area, are there other people that are doing what you're doing? Because I feel like what you're doing is kind of special, and there might need to be like more of you that need to pop up around the globe.
Yeah, I think that there does need to be more depth of medicine, in every profession. So if any practitioners or doctors are listening, I just, I'd love to invite them to shift maybe the way that they view things and take more time with their patients. And yes, maybe they'll make a little bit less money for a little while. However, it always actually comes back around and then often becomes more successful than what you can imagine, because you're really meeting people at a meaningful level and the results speak for themselves. So it is the most rewarding to see people heal and have these, where maybe they were in a wheelchair when I met them and now they're not, because maybe they had MS or something. And I'm not saying I can like cure MS. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I can help people restore health. And when you restore health to the cells and the organs and the body, really interesting things happen. And illnesses and disease seem to start dissolving in their systems, even if it's not typical. So I get to see a lot of atypical things. So as a practitioner, if you want to get atypical results in the best way possible, take your time. You'll see more, you'll feel more, you'll connect more, you'll feel more rewarded at the end of the day. You'll get better results. The patients will get better results. So I just see it as a win-win. And I think this is kind of the growing pain that maybe health in general needs to go through, or medicine, I should say, that we may have to take a few steps back to go forward. And I know it's already really next to impossible for people to get in to see their doctors, but I've met a lot of doctors and I've actually worked with a lot of doctors that probably wouldn't share that they came to see me, but they're not
Interesting.
healthy either.
Yeah.
Not all of them, because they're stressed, they're rushing, and a lot of them are really beautiful humans. They want to help, but working in a system that not is not conducive to their health is not going to be an effective place to be. So the rates of burnout and frustration and their own health suffering is actually really, really high. So I always thought, if I can't do my job and my mission that keeps me super healthy in the way that I want to work, that resonates for me, and I invite everybody to follow what resonates for them, then you'll be healthier in your job and you're going to be more effective for your patients. So the tips would be invite your practitioners to meet you, challenge them a little bit, even if that's hard. And the practitioners out there, challenge yourself to show up for yourself in your practice better. What really calls to you? How much better could you be in your work if you were healthy and aligned and happy? And so finding practitioners that are vibrating at that level, that's the next evolution that we're going into. And there's more showing up all the time. So I would say take your time finding the people that you want on your team. And it may take some time or some appointments and yes, some money to seek that out, but it's worth doing. It's worth being thorough to meet those right connections or feel that resonance with the practitioner of like, yeah, they're going to help me. I can feel it. And it's not necessarily what they're saying. I can just feel that resonance, that they actually embody what they're speaking. They don't just talk about it. And so that's a big one. I think returning to the breath
Mm.
and these things that are simple and free. There's a reason breathwork has become incredibly popular. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's become more and more talked about, more well known because people are having incredible experiences, and it's your own breath, it's your own body, it's your own physiology. And I think it's reminding people how powerful we really are. So don't underestimate this amazing biological suit, light bringing force that we have. And what are the main tools that we have? We can move our bodies, we can breathe, we can come into stillness even when it's hard. So that's what I've been finding for myself the last few years. The more stillness I can come into, the deeper my breath is, the deeper my breath gets, the more still I get. And the answers start showing up and insights start showing up around these questions that you might have in your own life around your health, or what do I do next? And if you don't know where to go, take a few minutes and pause in your life and take a few deep breaths and just give yourself that time, and your body will actually start often revealing and speaking to you. And if your body hasn't spoken to you for a little while, then that's even more incentive to get still and get quiet and get curious. And so, I know those aren't like remedies that you can take necessarily, but in some ways they are. And you can find them, right here. So the other side of it would be really clean water is underestimated. There's a lot of toxins in chlorinated water, in
Yep.
city water. And if people want to dive down that rabbit hole, I invite them to. What's one thing you take in every single day, or you should take in every single day? That is clean, healthy water. And then on the other side, start looking at where's your toxic load quotient for the day, and what are you taking in? And this can be a little bit sneaky, and I think this is part of the overconsumption of humanity, especially in North America. New houses, new cars, new clothes, all those things, those are really sneaky ways to be exposed to toxins. And even though I can admit, like, I love the new car smell, I haven't had new car smell myself for a long time, but it's very toxic to the system, unless of course you're rocking a high frequency. And new clothes, always wash them before you wear them because they're bathed in chemical toxins most of the time before you put them on. I've seen people break out in hives and rashes
Really?
from like putting new clothes on that they've never washed before. I've worked with patients that were in the building trades. The sawdust or the paint or the other fumes that off gas from things like vinyl flooring, very much overlooked. And you got a headache at the end of the day after laying flooring and just think, what's up with that? It's like, well, this new product that's been shipped in boxes, sealed containers, has often been like fumigated so that no bugs came over in the sea can that it got shipped in, or something like that. And that's pesticide, that's toxic, and you're like breathing that stuff in. So these little known things, new furniture, new homes, there's a lot more awareness about this stuff now of building green, using products that are low VOC, which is volatile organic compounds, But you can tell when you walk into somewhere if they've just like painted or got a lot of new fresh material in there, plastics and things. You can smell it. That's toxic off
Mm,
gassing. Like
crazy.
it's nuts, right? And again, I'm not trying to trigger anyone. It's like everywhere, but if you just look around and this is, I'm kind of feeling my ancestors right now. They lived in the same house for like 50 years, my grandparents. So there was not much off gassing happening because there was nothing new coming into the house. And so I think some of the older things that were built were amazing. And maybe there's some stuff like a coal furnace that wasn't so amazing. That was toxic too. So I'm not saying we haven't made a lot of improvements, but the question is, are some of these things improvements? So I'd say check your consumption habits, which isn't always what a lot of businesses want to hear. They're like, oh, nobody's going to buy all this new gear now. But like, look around you and see what you have that maybe you don't need, or before you buy that new thing, maybe just check and see if you really need that. And simplifying your life can be really profoundly affecting of your health, not just from a toxic point of view, with like physical toxins, but mental toxicity. Don't clutter your life either. Simplify. And especially right now, because it's been such a big challenge for most of humanity for the last 2, 3 years, the more you can simplify, the better it's going to be. So declutter yourselves in all the ways would be some of my
Mhm.
advice there.
Turn off the news. That's my tip.
Simplify. Yeah. Anything that's not essential, get rid of it.
Yeah,
100%.
get rid of the fear porn.
Yes.
That'll raise your frequency like 40 notches right there.
Overnight. Overnight. Yes.
I love it. Well, I'm going to leave it here for now. We are at time, but thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. You're just, yeah, I just feel so blessed to have met you. And I'm so excited for our appointment tomorrow and to update everybody listening about what we find, what we discover, and how we're going to work through some of these things. How can folks get in touch with you?
So drkevinpreston.com is our website, drkevinpreston.com. And that's the same handle on Instagram. I am on Instagram too. And I'm not always on there a ton, but I'm around. And the other thing about being of service in relationship to everything that we talked about, I've got a few elements that I've been working on. And one of them is building some courses
Mm,
that really
cool.
speak to these pieces and kind of go deeper. It's probably not going to be available till the new year in 2023, maybe even springtime. I'm still busy treating a lot of patients these days too, but that's the inspiration that's coming through is I can only see so many people in a day. I am just one guy, and I've got a beautiful clinic in Vernon, BC, and I've got other people that I get to work with there that are like powerhouse, amazing people too. And we're kind of working on the back end of the website right now. So there'll be a new website probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks as well, different than what's available now at the end of October here that we're speaking 2022. And we do have other big retreats and events that we're going to be doing more of. As I mentioned, I've done a lot of events the last few years. And in the last few months, we've done two big events. They were like 1 day mini retreats, and we had over 120 people at each one. And
I
we've
came
got
to one of those, I think.
yeah, and
The
well, we did
Equinox, right?
Yanks this, and yeah, we did Equinox back
Yeah.
in September.
Hmm.
And there's power in groups. There's power to be had in groups in terms of healing. And so this is a way I'm really loving exploring more of, is reaching a lot more people in 1 day and bringing more tools. And we've got some irons in the fire for sure for next year for some even bigger events than that I'm so excited about. So there's a variety of ways. You can see me in the clinic. I tend to be booked out months in advance, which again I'm really grateful for. But there's lots of tools in the meantime. So these are some of the things I'm developing to be able to kind of meet the demand, meet the needs. And yeah, in the meantime, we'll keep doing my thing.
Yay. I love that. I'm so glad you're doing courses. I think that's a brilliant idea. Okay, everyone. Well, now you know how to reach out to Kevin if you feel so inclined, and stay tuned for part 2, and we'll keep you updated on this progress. I feel like there's just going to be so much valuable information, especially for anybody who is dealing with similar symptoms that I'm dealing with, which I know a lot of people are. So again, thank you so much, and I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Krista. Thanks to everybody listening too. And yeah, many blessings. We'll see you.
See you.
Thanks so much for sharing your time and energy with us today. We'd love to hear your feedback on how our podcast has impacted your life, and are also open to suggestions for new and interesting topics. Please leave your comments with a quick review to help us grow this magical community of wellness warriors and light workers. Every month, we select one lucky reviewer to win a big magic box containing all 3 of our beautiful magic lattes. To connect with us further, check us out on Instagram at wild_remedies. Thank you again, and see you at the next episode.